Warning, the content in this episode, it discusses active shooter scenarios and threats that may be triggering to some. Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. On today's episode, we're joined by founder of safety and security consultants, Terrance Brown. Terrance Brown holds over 36 years of combined military, law enforcement, and safety management with the U.S. Air Force, Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, and Mercy Health Systems. Joining the U.S. Air Force as a security forces specialist in 1984, Terrance's services took him to Langley Air Force Base, Ghedi Air Base, and Nellis Air Base, where he played pivotal roles in securing vital resources and responding to threats. After his discharge following the Gulf War, Terrance transitioned to law enforcement, rising through the ranks to become the Master Patrolman with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, where he helped to suppress gang activity, trained with the Dignitary Witness Protection Unit, and worked with SWAT in a patrol capacity, serving high-risk warrants and conducting building searches. Today, as the founder of Safety and Security Consultants, LLC, Terrance continues his mission to prepare organizations for the unexpected. With the focus on incident response planning and active threat preparation, he empowers businesses, schools, and public venues to mitigate risks and protect lives. Terrance's dedication to education and training ensures that his team of consultants delivers the most up-to-date information and strategies to their clients. Through Safety and Security Consultants' unique 8-step process, they equip organizations with the tools they need to navigate crisis situations effectively. Join us as we delve into Terrance's expertise, insights, and passion for safeguarding communities. Whether you're a business owner, educator, or concerned citizen, his knowledge is invaluable in today's unpredictable world. Did you think that your life's work would be teaching organizations how to mitigate loss in crisis situations?
I did not. I did this in the military when I enlisted back in 1984, and I never thought that it would be, excuse me, a needed work, career in the civilian world. Like once I got out of the military, I just figured law enforcement, like most people.
Yeah.
I didn't think that, assessing risk and giving people a plan, an incident response plan was what we did in the military. We moved stuff from point A to point B, and we had to assess the risk along the way. And of course, we were tasked with the ability to neutralize that threat if we had to. But we always wanted to try to prevent that if possible. But we had to be prepared for all outcomes and variables. So you had to make sure you had enough people, you had the right equipment, have enough petroleum, gas to get you from point A to point B. So there's a whole lot of research that went into it. But I never thought that in the civilian world there would be a need for this. Unfortunately, because going back 30 years, the only people and the only jobs that were really concerned with mass shootings were postal workers. That's where the phrase was coined. They went postal.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, but
I'm familiar with the term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was it. That was the mass shooting of the era, was a postal worker who came home from, Vietnam, wasn't getting the services that they needed, and knew one way to deal with, stress and, and they would go terminate their supervisor and some of their coworkers if they had a grievance. But it was really pigeonholed to that, that skill set, for lack of a better word.
That's interesting. Did you, when you were growing up, what did you want to do? Did you know you were going to be in the military?
No, I got thrown a serious twist. My passion was athletics, sports, and hip hop was obviously big in the 80s. So was dance, actually. I was one of those breakdance kids,
No way.
Yeah. So I actually was looking into modeling career, acting, modeling, and I did a nurse training film for the state of Florida, and dancing. And then I graduated 17, and I was in this dance troupe, and MTV had just started, and they were looking for dancers to go over to London and be with downtown Julie Brown. So I actually tried out, and I got the job. And I brought this woman to my house at 17, who my parents didn't know from a can of paint, and told her that, they told my parents that she wanted to take me to Europe to make music videos. And
What?
I and I don't even think my parents had cable at the time. So they didn't even know what MTV was. And so needless to say, they shut that down with the quickness.
Yeah.
They were like, "You are not taking my baby overseas," and I was only 17, so I had no say so in it.
Mm.
So of course that kind of derailed, everything that I thought I was going to do. So that was the original calling. And I was always interested in safety and security. I had a job at the Valley Forge Music Fair, working security for local acts that would come to the music fair. And it was
Mm.
like a 3,000 seat in the round, um, like a miniature civic arena, basically. And that was where all the teenage kids worked, the parking lots, concession stands, and security. That's what
Yeah.
we did growing up. So I was always interested in security, but my that was fell way back to dance and performing.
That is so cool. And that's why I love having people on the show because you never know what takes them into where they are today. I mean, do you still dance? Like, do you like the
Oh yeah, my
music?
wife, she gets nervous when we go to functions because she knows a certain song will come on and trigger.
Oh my God. Are you the life of the party?
Oh she shakes her head like, "Oh Lord, here we go," you know.
I
And
love that.
I will clear the dance floor in a minute. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, no, I
So,
think that dancing is like such a great outlet too, particularly from like the work that you currently do. You probably
absolutely.
need to like go and like let loose, you know?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So, yeah, I look forward to dancing in the near future, after I get this knee back
that's
in
right.
order.
That's
But yeah,
right.
that was a segue. So my parents denied me that opportunity. So of course I was upset.
Right.
I'm like, "You just stole my dream. I'm out of here." And I
Yeah.
had no plan. So I was like, "Well, where can I go?" Growing up outside of Philly, we have street smart. So I was like, "Okay, where can I go to get room, board, meals, and a paycheck away from my parents?"
Right.
And the only option at that point was the military, because I didn't want to like go off and get a job in the trades. I didn't want to live at home. I wanted to get away from it at this point because I
Mhm.
was very, very upset with them. Um, and they were so cavalier, so cavalier, like, "Oh no," like that was it. That was it. End of dreams. It's like just blew it up. You know, like,
Yeah.
"No, well, Terrence, we're sorry. Maybe next year." It was none of that. It was just, "Oh no, you ain't taking my baby over to Europe." You know what I mean?
Wow.
So yeah, that's what. So I said, you know what? I went up to the recruiting station, jumped on the train, and went up to Westchester and walked down the gauntlet of the recruiter station because I knew I needed to get out of there. I was already graduated high school. I was 17,
Mhm.
so I didn't have a lot of leeway. So I actually was so skewed by the interaction with my parents that I actually upsold the recruiter that he was going to have a hard time getting my parents to sign off because I just had somebody at the house last month
Yeah.
to for an opportunity, and they shut it down. I said, so I don't know if they're going to go for this either, but I'm obviously only 17, so I need my parents' consent.
Yeah.
So um, I sat down. That recruiter came to the house, and he was an Air Force recruiter. I mean, he had the beret on, he had the ascot, he had the cord frame jump boots, he had pictures of Air Force One,
Yeah.
and the Thunderbirds, and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right there, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he goes, yeah. So he told me about security forces and versus law enforcement on the Air Force Base because they have both. And he told me that security would give me more opportunity to travel. And I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah.
So he went to the house and sat down and talked to Mr. and Mrs. Brown. And 3 months later, I was off to boot camp.
You were off.
they,
No, that's an
they didn't
amazing
even
journey.
they didn't even hesitate.
Yeah. They're like, he's not breakdancing, so
Yeah.
we'll take it.
Yeah, it was like, okay, yeah, you could have him. Like, didn't even blink. I was like, what? That's it?
Oh
Yeah,
my
so
gosh.
yeah, it
Well,
was a very interesting transition, but that put me on the path.
how did you get into this type of work?
So after the military, I was stationed in Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. This
Mhm.
is the first security police squadron, TAC headquarters. Government is very rigid and has a structure.
Sure.
So basically, things go through the Pentagon and then they go down to the bases by their ranking.
Mhm.
So, like, if you're a local air wing, where are you located?
I'm in DC.
DC. So, Edwards Air Force Base
Mhm.
might be, you know, the 265th Air Base Squadron, right? Well, Langley was the first, so it was one. So we got everything first, and then it would go down to the second, the third, the fourth, all the way to the 177th fighter, right?
Mhm.
So we got first crack at everything. So they would send us, we could be worldwide mobility anywhere in the world in 48 hours.
Mhm.
Our fighter planes, our resources, our munitions. That was the mission. So that kind of led us to the incident response, and security forces and air base ground defense. So that was pretty neat, and that was my introduction to it. So yeah, once I got out the military, I started looking for law enforcement jobs, and then did 12 years, and I had my shoulder replaced completely, but it was due to a military injury, so not work related, not police related.
Mm.
And then so I had to reinvent myself again because my career in law enforcement was over.
Right.
But I was vested. I had a pension secured. So yeah, so what else am I good at? Was my skill set, and I started looking for safety and security director jobs and landed at Mercy Behavioral, who was just starting up. This is the beginning of the shutdown of the state hospitals across the nation.
Okay.
And they deal with the behavioral and the people that are involuntarily committed. And they started shutting down the state hospitals here in Pennsylvania and pretty much everywhere. But Mercy Behavioral is part of Trinity Health, and they saw a need to build facilities that weren't institutions but were more residential, but they would
Okay.
still have security fence and 24-hour daycare and doctors and nurses, medical staff, and behavioral specialists and things like that. So they saw a need to house these folks that were going to be sent out, removed from the state hospitals. So they came at me and asked me if I was interested in becoming a safety manager for Pittsburgh Mercy. And I said, sure, absolutely. So I started there. And then in 2011, we had a mass shooting happen at the University of Pittsburgh campus. And that's what really raised awareness
Mm.
uh, in the region as far as incident response and the importance of having a plan just in case something like this were to happen. It was after Sandy Hook, and so there was a little bit of momentum there,
Yeah.
but it really didn't hit home in Pittsburgh until that shooting happened at Western Psych back in 2012. Uh,
Right.
Michael was a wonderful, caring person.
At just 25, Michael Schaub's family says he was living his dream, working as a therapist at Western Psych. This is something they are struggling to digest. As they watched the news coverage of the shooting inside Western Psych, they worried that their nephew was hurt, but felt some comfort knowing he worked on the 12th floor, not the first floor where the shootings were reported.
that's when it raised awareness and people started thinking about, whoa, like, okay, how many other mental health and behavioral health facilities are there in Western PA, and what's stopping this from happening to us?
So when you were hired for this position in the behavioral health facilities, was your role to come up with strategy?
Yes, it was to troubleshoot, come up with strategy, um, identify weaknesses, give them recommendations on what they could do to better protect themselves from an
Mm.
incident response from an active shooter or an active threat, which was right in my wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
it was a natural transition. So I did my first vulnerability assessment for Pittsburgh Mercy, and they had 120 sites. So and some were corporations, were big headquarters, some were small residential programs where they just had an apartment with 24-hour-a-day staff, and people lived there, and they were
Mm-hmm.
productive folks in the community, and they just lived at this facility with assisted living, but they were able to go out into the into the community and come back. But they had people there 24/7 around the clock. So it was very unique because each site, I like to say cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Each site, it wasn't a cookie cutter where I just stamped the same thing over and over and over again. And
Okay.
that was very intriguing to me that each site was unique when it came to preparing for an active threat or an active shooter situation. So an intellectual disability day program with adults and people that are non-ambulatory is very different from a campus that has, drug and alcohol, a drop-in center and a computer lab.
You mean very different in terms of the security?
Yeah, and just their needs because of the person served, the people that they serve, the
Mm.
needs of those people. Some people are ambulatory, they can move on their own, some people are not. So that changes everything. When you're talking about sheltering in place,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Some people can physically hear the alarm and evacuate a building like we did in school, like we were taught.
Yeah.
But if you make that school an intellectual disability school or a day program for adults with intellectual disabilities, they're not able to just evacuate, right? So that
Yeah.
makes it, so now you're into, okay, well, what can we do to better protect them? Well,
Mm.
now we have to harden the facility, right? Because they're not going to be able to get out. So now we have to identify safe places inside this building. And now we have some safe places, but it doesn't meet the criteria of all the people that we have. It's not going to house everyone. So now we have to create and look for identified safe spaces. And then we have to figure out how to reinforce those spaces because
Right.
these folks aren't going to be able to leave. They're not going to be able to go anywhere. So it
Was
kind of
there
just morphed into it.
Yeah, was there an aha moment that led you to starting your own, you know, company, safety and security consultants?
Yeah, actually, there was. I was doing this for Pittsburgh Mercy full time, and I was the safety manager. So this was my job, was to go out and look at these buildings and sites and sit on these boards and do root cause analysis with them. And then they started sending me out into the community to all the Catholic linked universities and charities that they were affiliated with
Mhm.
through Trinity Health um, and the Catholic Church. So all of a sudden, I'm now doing stuff for schools and universities and the Mother House, which is where all the nuns lived at Carlow College, and they're sending me out like pretty regularly. And
Mhm.
I was like, you could. This is a business opportunity. You could. I'm already doing a monthly training at Mercy, so why don't you have those people, come to Mercy, sit in the training room, and get the training instead of sending me out to them to do the training?
Yeah.
And for some reason, the administration was like, no, well, we kind of like, what we're doing. And I was like, okay. I said, well, I'm getting phone calls now because you guys put me out there.
Yeah.
So people are literally calling me saying, hey, can you, Fifth District Court, Allegheny County, can you, cater this towards, the juvenile, system and the courthouse and, the magistrate's office and the judge's chambers and it's all coming through Mercy.
Mhm.
And they were like, yeah, we're not interested in that. I said, well, do you mind if I do it? And they said, well, no, as long as you take time off, like PTO.
Yeah.
And I said, are you sure? And they said, yeah, because I saw the opportunity because my phone's ringing, like pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a hard sell for me to realize that there was something here. And everybody was aware because at this point, mass shootings were ramping up.
Right.
At that point, I remember vividly during the PowerPoint training, and there was 3 states that didn't have a mass shooting yet. It was like Alaska, Hawaii, and like Montana or something
Mm.
at the time. And all the other states had had at least one. And it was slowly ramping up and getting momentum that this was, the new threat, at home. So yeah, it was very interesting. And then they didn't push back. They let me um take my time off and I got a couple clients, and then it just snowballed. And then I was like, okay, well, now I can't hide the money
Right.
because I'm getting 1099, right, from these organizations for these trainings
Sure.
that I'm doing. So that led me to, okay, pricing this out, because I was doing it as my salary for Mercy. So I wasn't writing up an assessment and giving them an invoice,
Yeah.
my job at Mercy. So now I had to develop, spreadsheets and invoices and,
Yeah.
verbiage. And I went to, that Mercy sent me to a couple of trainings where people would sign up. Was it a Crisis Intervention Association of Western Pennsylvania had an annual conference at Nemacolin Spa and Resort, and they would have me go there and speak on active threat, active shooter. And then, of course, once I got into a classroom, people would want my business card
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Hey, we need you to come out and look at our building," you know?
Yeah.
So it just kind of morphed. And then I said, well, now I have to get an EIN. I got to find an accountant, got to get somebody to build this business for me because, I'm not trying to get in trouble with the IRS.
Exactly. So it sounds like it came from, the clients that you were already working with, the word of
Right.
mouth, and then also referrals is what kind of turned it into a
Yeah,
full-fledged business.
definitely referrals. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely still to this day referrals. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I don't do a
uh,
lot of advertising. I have a website, obviously.
yeah,
But if you Google search active threat scenario training or active shooter, and I get stuff from Colorado. I just did a company that had 41 sites in 10 states,
mm-hmm.
um, called the East Coast Migrant Head Start Project. And they deal with migrant workers in aquaculture and agriculture. And
Interesting.
they provide Head Start trainings for their kids that are in the fields and in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to assess their buildings in all 10 states. So
Yeah,
we finished that up, but that was a referral too. Like yeah,
yeah. It makes sense to me that you touched a little bit about marketing and advertising, and that you don't really have a need for it because it's mostly referral based and word of mouth. And unfortunately, it makes so much sense because there's such a need for it. I mean, everyone needs to be protected. Going back a little bit to what you were saying when you were working in some of the behavioral health facilities, and how depending on the different needs of the people that were in these facilities, that meant for a different strategy. I want to know, in just like doing some research prior to this interview, I was looking at mass shootings that happened in like some of these high security buildings. For example, I'm here in Washington, D.C., and so we had the lone gunman back in 2013, which was on a in a military facility in the Navy Yard.
We can confirm that the deceased shooter from this morning has been identified as 34-year-old Aaron Alexis of Fort Worth, Texas.
We know that there are 13 fatalities, including the shooter who perished today.
The shooter killed 12 people. He ended up dying. And then in your city, Pittsburgh, at Western Psych, there was 1 dead, 7 wounded. I just want to know, these facilities were very highly secure. There are cameras, there's guards, there's bulletproof glass, there's all the things.
right.
Where did they go wrong that these shootings were still able to happen? And I guess where do you step in to ensure that doesn't happen again?
Right. A lot of times it is the mass notification part of it, because all it takes is one ill-guided person with a plan to change your lives forever. If they have no threat or fear of losing their own life, that's the biggest threat. That lone wolf individual who's out there who really wants to get at this organization, this entity, or this person. So you can't necessarily stop them from trying to enter. You can put barriers up to stop them,
Mm-hmm.
probably. But if they force their way in, Sandy Hook, shoot your way through the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Washington Navy Yard, he was an employee, so I think he had credentials.
Right.
So that that bypasses, right, the security measures you have in place versus the person driving up to the front door, getting out, and just running in like they're trying to rob a bank, right?
Yeah.
So they have intended targets, so it really depends on it. Like I said, it's so fluid. There's really not one thing. but it's basically how to mitigate losses and how to limit targets of opportunity when a crisis occurs. That's what organizations are going to be judged on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what insurance people and the lawyers are going to be looking at. How bad was it? Was this person contained? Which is why now you have schools that are dropping security gates and putting in high definition cameras and even smoke and tear gas, right? If you were to Google safest school in America, I think one of the schools that comes up is in Indiana. And they have a real-time camera that goes right to the dispatcher at the local police department. And they can control gates that come down. They can control tear gas. They can basically box that person in from a safe distance, right? And then wait for SWAT to come in and neutralize the threat. So I would say the ability to communicate with others keeps the targets of opportunity down, right? Because without that, you have chaos. And if you have chaos, people running around and everybody doesn't have a plan, then you're providing more, right, targets of opportunity for a bad guy. Another example was we had a school stabbing. 26 people were stabbed by a kid who brought 2 steak knives to school. But everybody said, well, how the hell did he stab, this many people? Well, the kids did the best that they could do, and they didn't have a blue pull station. They only had the fire station. So when they saw the incident happen, they evacuated the school by pulling the fire, which, of course, we're all taught what happens when the fire truck goes off, right? You exit the building, but it doesn't say don't use hallway C. Exit the building, but don't use hallway C. You just go to the closest exit.
Leave, yeah.
Right? You just leave. And if you happen to pick the wrong hallway, you came in contact with this kid with 2 steak knives who was actively stabbing people. So the hallways went from, not so full to classroom starts to classrooms dump out. And now you've forgiven this person way more targets of opportunity, to make it such a mass casualty event. And that's one of those mass notification systems. So change those red pull stations to blue pull stations, right? Have both, right? You have fire code, now you have lockdown code, right? So now people know shelter in place versus try to exit the building.
What sort of organizations are you working with?
A lot of mental health, a lot of behavioral health. And behavioral health is growing because folks, I have a couple of clients that started off with just outpatient, and now they have a dental wing. Now they have primary care physicians. Now they have drug and alcohol, and they're growing and they're renting more space. So I'm going back to the same organizations multiple times to assess their new purchases and their new floors that they're leasing space. But I've done private clubs, social clubs. I've done state government buildings. It really, I mean, just last week I did an assessment for a law firm in downtown Pittsburgh on the 22nd floor of a high rise. So yeah, there's no specific. It's anyone who needs an incident response plan, which of course didn't used to be the case when you go back 12 to 15 years.
Yeah.
I think the 9 down in South Carolina was the one that really raised awareness that we need, and then of course followed up by the synagogue shooting here in Pittsburgh, right?
Yep.
But that churches weren't thinking about incident response plans.
Right.
Places of worship weren't thinking about incident response plans.
Yeah.
No one's thinking that I'm gonna have Bible study on Wednesday night. If you're, a religious person, that was something that, was standard across the country. Bible study on Wednesday night. No one's thinking, well, we need to warn people. We need to make sure no one's coming in with weapons. That's a place of worship, right? So that's what really raised everyone's awareness that this thing is completely out of the box now.
Yeah.
And that every person needs an incident response plan. Every organization. I don't care if you're at Starbucks or Walmart, Costco, it doesn't matter. Everyone needs an incident response plan because this has happened and is happening, in different organizations across the country.
Let's face it, starting a business is hard work, and building a website for a business, that's another story. Why not hire some help? 35th Street Builders are not just website builders, they're dreamers. With experience spanning in startups to enterprises, 35th Street Builders will provide you with the mobile app and web development skills to get your business up and running. At 35th Street Builders, they pride themselves on affordability, reliability, and compassion. Ready to take some work off your plate? You can schedule an intro call with 35th Street Builders by going to their website at 3sb.io. That's the number 3, the letter S, the letter B.io.
I want to talk about understanding the threat. Just to give my listeners, a little bit of an education, but how would you define an active threat scenario and what distinguishes it from other emergency situations?
Well, active threat is different than active shooter. That's when someone is trying to cause harm without an actual firearm. So that would be the scenario I told you about with a knife, right? Or a bomb, suspicious package. So that's one of the scenarios. Active threat is different than active shooter. And people can cause harm without having a firearm, right? So that's really important to know too. So that's incorporated into our body of work when we do a training. Our training is 3 hours long, and we cover active threat and active shooter because there is a big difference. But you can cause harm with a bomb. And you see during the 2016 National Convention, someone started sending out suspicious white powders, to the head of the, Democratic National Convention leaders. So that's an active threat, right? And then you have an active shooter, which is actually a person who's trying to cause harm, to an institution or a person in a confined and populated place. So those are the big differences.
What do you have any insights into common motivations behind these threats or shootings?
Yes. Experts have said, and we do a lot of training, obviously, and stay up to date with the local law enforcement response. Calhoun Weston came up with a model called the pathway to violence. You can actually find this on the DHS website. DHS doesn't copyright any of their materials. So it's Calhoun Weston's pathway to violence. And the commonalities there are there's always a grievance. And they really break this down, in the training. It's about probably an 8-minute video. But the presence of a grievance is the one common denominator that they really stress on. And then what do you do with that information? When you have someone who is acting outside of the norm, and it could be something as simple as the person whose lunch gets stolen on a regular, right? And they're just obsessed with who is doing this, right? To the point where they're not just moving on, right? The boss or the supervisor who's riding you a little bit longer and making you close and open the next day and giving you the worst routes. That grievance, we all have grievances. It's a matter of what do you do with that grievance?
I want to talk about the training and preparation a little bit. So when an organization hires you to come in and train their employees in an active shooting scenario, what does that training look like?
It's a 3-hour block. We cover police, law enforcement response. So we call it active threat scenario training. So we want you to now be aware of the whole process, what it's going to look like. So it starts off with a little bit of background on mass shootings, intended targets, what to look out for, pathway to violence video, Calhoun Weston model. And then we get into commonalities, what to look for. And then we move on to site-specific safe rooms, identified safe rooms. Why did I pick these places as safe rooms? Then we go into law enforcement response, which is the SWAT team and the emergency service teams that are going to be responding to you, what you can expect from them, so that you're not caught off guard by that. Don't run up to them, don't hug them, give them their space, keep your hands visible, raise those hands, spread those fingers, keep your hands, don't do the hoodie and the, exit the building and when told to, right, once the situation's been cleared. The authentication process, how do you know when It's okay to come out of your shelter in place, your safe room, what that looks like. So that's really important for folks to know, because you're in a hurry to get into a safe room,
Yeah.
right? But you're not in a hurry to come out. When you think about that, why are you in a hurry to come out? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of blood. They don't clean up before you come out of your identified safe place. So they had to blindfold those poor kids at Sandy Hook, so they wouldn't see all the blood and carnage that was there. So
Yeah.
you're not in a hurry to get out. But how do you know when it's okay to come out? What does that look like without training, right? So we teach people to authenticate with the police. We give them a preset, we give them a template that has them create a sign and a countersign.
Mm.
This goes back to the military days. A sign and a countersign. So you give the dispatcher, before you leave, half of a code word. So for simplistic purposes, we'll say peanut butter. So before you end that call with 911 saying that you're in lockdown, I'm at 265 South 9th Street, and we're in lockdown, they're going to ask you yes or no questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? But before you end that call, you say, hey, we have an incident response plan, we have a lockdown plan, and we're sheltering in place. So law enforcement isn't going to see anyone here because we have identified safe places to go. Those rooms are identified by whatever means, circular dots, certain color, whatever. But the most important thing is that you come, obviously, to help us. But then when it's over, when you've neutralized the threat, have the police officers knock on the door and announce the word peanut butter. If everything is okay, the people inside the room will respond with the code word jelly, right? So when you put it together, you get peanut butter and jelly.
Mm-hmm.
And that lets you know that you know who you're talking to on that person on the other side of that door, because you gave them the word peanut butter. There's
Yeah.
no other possible way that they would have that information short of you giving it to them, right? So
That's
now you
interesting.
know. So that's one of the tactics that we use for clearing the scene once it's over with. And then we, like I said, we go into the driving forces behind it, best ways to mitigate the losses. We give them scenarios. Some people have me do an exam because they want it to be testable, scalable, right?
Yeah.
And then they have to get a 70% or better. They have to come back, take the course again. So it all varies on the organizations.
You talked a little bit earlier about the communication strategies and how important it is to have good communication during these scenarios. What role does effective communication play in responding to, active threat situations?
It's everything. During the training, we tell people the good guys aren't coming until somebody makes the call.
Yeah.
You can't assume that the person next door is going to make the call, right? You can't assume that. So everybody makes the call. Inundate 911, saturate them. Some 911 facilities now are receiving text messages, right? So you don't even have to get on the phone and talk and whisper. You can just text them your situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important. But the mass notification is huge, because that's when not are you just notifying law enforcement, you're notifying all the other potential targets on your campus, in your building, and your facility, that there is something that's happening here,
Right.
and that you need to take action appropriately. If some people teach run, hide, and fight, which is run out the building. My only issue with running out the building is you don't know what you're running into.
Mm. That's
So
funny. That was a question that I was going to ask you. We often hear about the strategy run, hide, and fight. Is that a strategy that you teach?
no, I use it, but my clients all have a customized security plan. They
Okay.
all have identified safe places to run to. So
Okay.
I never recommend you leaving, like taking people off of the third floor, running down 3 flights of stairs and trying to get out of the building. The key word is trying to get out of the building,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know what you're going to run into. You don't have a camera feed. Now, if you are high tech enough to have an app where you can see your camera feed and you know that there's no one there, then that completely changes things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have that technology, you're rolling the dice, and you could potentially be taking people into harm's way. So it's a lot safer for you to find an identified safe place, barricade that, shelter in place, put things in front of that door, call 911, and wait, because the barricade serves two purposes. It puts distance between you and the bad guy, but it also protects you, from fire, because not fire, but the bullets, because when you put that heavy equipment in front of those doors, a high power rifle won't go through a phone book,
Yeah.
right? So all those files that you have in that cabinet that you put in front of that door, and that dresser that you have, and the desk that you have, all those things are added layers of protection, right? That you
Mm.
don't have when you try to evacuate the building and not knowing what you're evacuating into.
So, how can organizations enhance their like physical security measures to reduce risk?
I would say have someone, an entity like SSC, come in and do a vulnerability assessment. I have organizations do it proactively. I have organizations who, property managers that rent out space, after the pandemic. Obviously, that's slow coming back right now, but they want to know how much they can get for their office space. And that's
Hmm.
going to be determined by, well, do you have biometrics? Do you have access control on your elevators? If I rent 5 floors, do I have to worry about Joe Blow coming up to my 5 floors?
Yeah.
Right. So that's something you need to take into consideration. So if you have all these boxes checked, then you can charge a premium price. But if you don't have all those boxes checked and those elevators aren't keyed to your floors, like the law firm I did just the other day, they sent me a QR code that I gave to the security person before I went through the gates. It was almost like a subway turnstile. And they had a
Hmm.
QR code reader that I could just show them, right?
Yeah.
Scan, show my ID, scan my thing, and it automatically let the person know up at the law firm that I had just checked in and I was on my way up.
That's interesting. You bring up a good point about the pandemic. And, I think about people not, a lot of people aren't going back, haven't gone back to the office, and a lot of offices are still vacant. Do you think, has that changed your trainings at all? Or do you find that buildings have become more lax because there's less people in the building in terms of their security measures?
No, I've actually found the trend that people are more concerned when they come back, how safe is it?
Okay.
So they're more concerned now that they're back because people are comfortable working at home,
Yeah.
right? You have an office, I'm in a home office, right?
Yeah.
So you want me to come back downtown? Oh,
Right.
well, what do we have in place for me to come back downtown, right? Now I got to
Yeah.
deal with parking garages, elevators, right? Security personnel, disgruntled employees, right?
Yeah.
So all those things come into play.
How are you tapping into like the emotional responses of your participants? Because I could see how triggering it might
Oh, yeah.
be to go through these sort of scenarios.
Yeah, when we do the drills, we're real cautious. We tell them I'm not sending guys in ranger gear and doing flashbangs. And, now they have stuff like that that's out there, a
Yeah.
tabletop. They call it a tabletop exercise where you actually get law enforcement, EMS, and all those people to come do one, right?
Mhm.
That's a really big deal. And that's
Mm.
more for them than it is for the client, right? For emergency people to know how your county's going to respond and set up their pods and their trauma units and medications, like Katrina, our most disastrous natural disaster in U.S. history, right?
Mhm.
That was a huge taking, right? So that's
Mhm.
why you do tabletops. But as far as just a regular organization, we try not to traumatize them, because I want them to know that they can find a safe room, find the kit, open up the kit, find that code word, authenticate with police. And that lets me know that they at least know where to go. And they found that standard operating procedure in that lockdown kit, and that they know the code word and they can go through that questions with the 911 dispatch. That's
Okay.
the important part for me. You found
Okay.
your safe room, you found your kit, you know how to authenticate, and you took people with you, right?
Yeah.
Those are the takeaways from safety security consultants there. Part of the training, ironically, is what will your mentality be in a crisis situation?
Mhm.
How do you know? Like, literally, how do you know? Like, you might think that I'm going to be the person who runs back into the World Trade Center on 9/11 and gets 65 more people out. And then it happens.
Mhm.
And you're outside in disbelief and in shock. And you didn't go back and get anybody. And someone had to guide you away from the
Yeah.
scene. Like, you don't know until you're there. That's why military police training is repetitive, right? I know blindfolded that I know where my firearm is, right?
Yeah.
It's like tying your shoe. you can tie your shoe with your eyes closed because it's muscle memory, right? You have
Right.
to practice those things, right? So same thing. So I want them to become proficient in it's drilling. Like complacency in my field leads to casualty, right? One of my little scenarios is going to a safe room instead of staying in your identified office could be a life-saving decision for you. So I
Mm-hmm.
tell people going to an identified safe room that's outside of your office, even if your office is a safe room. Because how shocked do you think that doctor was when he realized that that shooter at Western Psych who shot 7 people was his?
Was looking for him. Yeah.
Like that's that aha, come to Jesus moment. Like, whoa, you know?
Is your training more so to get everybody to protect themselves, or do you identify leaders in a situation? Like, how do you talk about crisis leadership at all?
Yes. So what we do is it used to be a 2 hour training and now it's 3 hours. And this is all from trial and error, right? So it was a 2 hour course with a 1 hour shepherd's training. And I coined the word shepherds because I remember I founded this at Mercy. I had obviously a religious institution, and shepherds, biblically speaking, do what? What's their job?
They herd people to safety,
Right.
or
They look after the sheep,
yeah,
right? They lead the sheep. That's
yeah.
what they do. That's their job. They're just out there protecting their sheep from predators, prey, whatever, right? So I coined the phrase shepherd because biblically speaking, that's what I want people to do. I
Yeah.
want you to shepherd people to a safe place, right? Get them to a safe place. And it sounds a whole lot better than active shooter monitor, right?
Right. Yeah,
So getting people to
definitely.
sign up to become an active shooter monitor. Or who's my active shooter monitor, right? Like, whoa, 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 who's that? I just want to get to a safe place. But when you coin it as shepherds and phrase it as a shepherd, it changes things, right? So we teach the shepherds what to do, how to calm people down, how important it is to find that kid, call 911, get off the phone with 911, turn around to everybody in your safe room and say, hey, I just got off the phone with dispatch. They have our emergency. They know we're in crisis. We have the placard system up. Our barricade is solid. We should be hearing sirens any minute. And that's going to help de-escalate everyone, in that situation.
Mhm.
But it used to be separate where staff and organizations told me who they wanted to be the shepherd. But then guess what? Once we started doing the drills, shepherds weren't there that day. Somebody was off. Somebody was sick.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. So now we're doing a drill and people are going to the safe rooms and there's
Mhm.
no shepherd. All they know is get to a safe room because they took the training. But now there's no one to lead them, to deal with that crisis that you're talking about, to calm them, to let them know that we're okay, to let them, there's nobody to do that. So now the training is 3 hours and everybody that goes through the training is considered a shepherd.
Do you feel like you're walking in your purpose?
Absolutely, unequivocally, yes. There is no doubt in my mind that this, from the age of 17 to now. Now, I never thought, like we said at the beginning, that this was going to be a model in the civilian world. I thought I could make a career out of it in the military, but if I enlisted 17, guess what? By 37, I could retire because I
Mhm.
did my 20 years. But
Mhm.
still, after that, what do I do with this information? So now, knowing that this, from the 17-year-old kid, Terrence, growing up outside of Philly, to having my own company who's traveling the nation and giving people best practices on how to best survive and mitigate losses and limit targets of opportunity in
Yeah.
crisis situations. There's no doubt in my mind that this is what I was promising.
You talked earlier about how there aren't a lot of people in your industry doing what you do. For someone listening to this right now and interested in going into this line of work, do you have any advice on how to be successful or like sustainable in this industry?
Yes. You have to train. You have to get a lot of information to stay current because no one wants to hear statistics from 2014, right? Because the numbers are completely different in 2014 than they are in 2024, right?
Mhm.
So you have to train and get to know the data. You have to know that there's websites out there that you can update your trainings on the regular, so you're giving them current information.
Hmm.
You have to have a passion for helping people, because it shows. When I do a presentation, I'm literally batting 1,000 if a company tells me that they want me to come in and present for services and explain what we do, my 8-step process. I'm never had an organization say, you know what, Terrence, thank you for your time. We're going to go in a different direction, because I customize it to them.
Yeah.
So if you just want the vulnerability assessment and that's it, I can do that for you.
Yeah.
You want to do the vulnerability assessment and then implement the findings and recommendations, but now you've hit an obstacle because you don't have a guardian or an IT person who can put these cameras in. I offer a person. I have a relationship with people, right? So I'm purposely designed this to be a one-stop shop. And my networking skills are, that's all I do.
Yeah.
No matter where I'm at, I'm networking. Like, I'm always networking. It's business cards are always with me. Shirts,
Always
monogram,
branding. Yes.
always brand. Like, people, hey, what's that? What's that? I'm in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I provide people with incident response plan. What's incident response plan? Well, my office could use that. You got a card on you?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, sure. Here you go, buddy. Call me up anytime. I'd love to send some people by and give you a plan. Right? Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Mm.
Right? So, but that's trial and error, knowing, to go out and invest in the shirts. I was buying the golf shirt already. So
Hmm.
now I just have an embroiderer that puts my safety security logo
Love it. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you'd love to add to this interview?
on. Raising awareness is the biggest piece, I think, is people need to know that there are organizations out there like SSC who can walk you through it, because it can be intimidating. I just did one last week and the company was overwhelmed. Like, we don't know where to start.
Hmm.
Like, we know we need it, but I have to get a team together in place to even address,
Hmm.
to show your product that you just briefed me on to my executive team. And I got an email last night. I sent out an email at 1 a.m. because she was going into her executive team meeting today and wanted a cost analysis of what it was going to cost. So I said, okay, I can give you some ballpark, because they were nonprofit and I have flat rates, for certain things.
Yeah.
And then if you're for profit, obviously the sliding scale changes, how many buildings I have to do, how long it's going to take. Is there travel involved, right?
Yeah, I'm curious, in this line of work, you are an entrepreneur. I know that you've talked a lot about security and the services that you provide, but is this line of work lucrative as an entrepreneur?
It can be. I mean, the small places, a Milestone or a small mental health agency, that you can think of down the street from you, who sees people on a regular basis, $1,500 for a vulnerability assessment, $200 an hour for expertise.
Hmm.
So you're not getting rich, but once again, it's my calling.
Yeah.
So I get just excited for that mom and pop, mental health facility as I do for East Coast Migrant Head Start Project. That was high 6 figures,
Yeah.
because it was 41 sites, in 10 states. Right. So to me, it's the same thing. It's just 41 sites for one company versus
Hmm.
41 individual calls to go out and look at this building. Right. So yeah, it can be because, and then your skill set determines your price.
Right.
And that's the other side of the financial and entrepreneur side. Is I get a lot of phone calls from people looking for advice. I was just out at a cigar lounge the other day, and a guy who retired from police is a speaker, and he wanted to know how he could better market himself, you know, to put his information out there. Like, what are
Hmm.
the platforms that are the best ones to use? And I told him, I said, dude, you got to find conferences. And you get on a conference and you tell them that you want to present, and you take a hit, because you got to get there, you got to set up, you got to do your PowerPoint, you get 30 minutes, but people are signing up for your class. So they already have a vested interest,
Hmm.
right? So now you have a captive audience and you get 35 minutes to 40 minutes before they have to go to another, and they're signing up for what they want. I want active shooter. I want, crisis management. I want de-escalation. I want critical stress incident. And that's what they're going to sign up for the day. So
Yeah.
you have a captive audience. And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. So, yeah, dude, like you got to find these places, these organizations, these conferences, and then you market yourself, you put yourself in the room. And like I said, if you know that you don't have a plan, there's no way you're not going to call. And you're not going to pass that information on.
Yeah.
So it just kind of refers itself, So it's funny because the marketing people call me up all the time, or they go onto the website or whatever, and they think that they can increase my likes or my hits or whatever, get me more people. And I said, did you even read the website? They were like, well, yeah, safety security consultants, right? I said, yeah, but do you know what we do? And they was like, no. I said, I provide incident response plans for people. And they just go silent because it's a new term. I didn't coin it, but that's what we call it in the military, is an incident response plan, right? And then they say, I said, so now can you tell me, Mr. Marketer, who doesn't need an incident response plan? Churches need them now. They didn't used to.
Yeah.
Starbucks needs them now. Gas stations need them now. Get-Go, supermarkets, Tops, the Buffalo shooting, right?
Everybody, yeah.
Everybody needs a plan. So what I need you for? I said, my thing is awareness. Like, people need to know I'm out here. But I'm not trying to fix the world all at once, Ideally, my business model, Amber, is to hire, which I do, vets coming home with a unique skill set like myself and teach them to be me in their cities, in their organizations.
Yeah. And it's a great alternative. Just listening to your journey, it's a great alternative from people who are in law enforcement that are looking to do something a little different, but really wanting to help people. So
right. Retirees too. I get a lot of retired, a lot of U.S. Marshals, a lot of Secret Service people looking for something to do. They don't want to get bored. Because you retired 50 years old, 65. That's still young.
Yeah.
So then now you have all this knowledge. So what are you gonna do with it?
Exactly.
Right? So become a consultant, right?
Yeah.
Come to Pittsburgh and take a training with me and sit in the back of the room and see if you like it. And we'll train you up, cut you loose, turn you out there, almost like a franchise now.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing more about what you do. And I think that so many people listening to this are not only going to walk away with like how you started this company, but really how they can use your services to ensure safety in their places of work. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for reaching out. And I hope that we can together, right, help people have a secure workplace, to get to and from, come home to your loved ones at the end of the day. So our little catchphrase is helping you plan a secure future.
I love that. Thank you so much, Terrence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea podcast. Today's guest was Terrance Brown, founder of Safety and Security Consultants. You can hire him and his team for active threat and shooter training by going to his website at safetysecurityconsultants.com. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. Shout out to my producers Kayla and Chris for the edits every week. If you have a bright idea or a topic you think I should cover on the show, hit me up on social media or email me at amber@abrightidea.show. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.